Yeah. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and even good evening to a couple of people who are here that I see from Central Asia. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I see, as I said, we've got people from all over the world, much like one of our MBA classes, actually. So my name is Healy, and as Rupert said, I head up MBA Recruitment. I've been working in business education for about 15 years. So what we were trying to do today is not to perhaps repeat the same formulaic MBA presentation and just have a Manchester MBA sales pitch. What we want to do today is that everyone who's joining us, that you actually take something away that's going to help you with your MBA research and your MBA knowledge. And that's whether you join the Manchester MBA or whether you join another program or whether you don't go on to pursue an MBA. But the key thing for us is that you're going to pick up some very useful tips today. So before we get started, I'll ask Xavier and Nia just to give a quick introductions to themselves, and then I'll start with some questions. Xavier, over to you first, please.
Thanks, Chris. Just to reiterate all the warm greetings that both yourself and Rupert have already given to our attendees today. Good afternoon if you're here in the UK or certainly around Western Europe, but obviously, as Chris said, we have people coming from different parts of Asia, so that's possibly good evening. And if you happen to be in the Americas, then it's certainly good morning and possibly quite an early one too. My name is Xavier Duran, and I am the MBA Programs Director here at Alliance Manchester Business School at the University of Manchester. And as such, I look after our portfolio of MBA programs. So that is our full-time MBA program and also our suite of professional MBA. So our Global MBA, our Global Executive MBA, and the Kelly Manchester Global MBA program. And I'm delighted to be here today. Pass it on to Nia.
Hi everyone, lovely to see you. I can't actually see you, but I see there's participants in the room, so it's a pleasure to be here today. My name's Nia Watkin Jones, and I'm the MBA Assistant Director at the Business School, supporting Xavier Duran with the development and the delivery of our MBA programs. But my specific focus is on our part-time MBAs, professional MBAs. So I'm happy to be here today to talk to you a bit more about those.
Thank you very much, Nia and Xavier. So we'll get started then. I think it's hopefully a simple question for you first, Xavier, but one that I think is going to be very useful for the audience as well, especially for those who I think who are based in the UK here, that we might not be as knowledgeable as MBAs as perhaps some of our guests from, say, the US or India, etc. So firstly, what is an MBA, Xavier?
What is an MBA? So I would expect to know that one myself anyway. But I think, I suppose, beyond the obvious, a Master of Business Administration. An MBA in essence is the I would say the business and management qualification par excellence that is actually known the world over by applicants, by students, and certainly as well by employers. It's a very, very well recognized qualification. It's been around for a long time, since the early 1900s, and is one indeed that is also incredibly resilient. So some qualifications might come and go, but you always hear about MBAs. And of course, its curriculum, the way we actually teach you, or the nature of the students that we might be attracting, may that be part-time or full-time, might vary over time, but certainly what we're trying to do with an MBA is always the same. In essence, an MBA is what we call a general business and management qualification. And by using the word broad or general, I don't want you to think of it in any pejorative sense whatsoever, quite the opposite. But the idea is that we're actually attracting people that already have a significant level of of experience. So if we're looking at full-time MBA programs, we would have been looking traditionally at having at least 6, 7, 8 years of professional experience. And when we're looking at professional MBAs, this is significantly more. So we look, for instance, at our Global MBA would be looking typically at around 15 years experience, and at our Global Executive MBA, that can actually go to 20, 25, or even 30 years of experience. But what that means is that it's about a program that attracts people that have a lot of experience, but sometimes experience is actually really siloed, compartmentalized in a very, very specific area. May that be finance, may that be sale, perhaps business development, or perhaps in a very technical role in engineering, or as project managers, or as computer scientists, or we might be looking at people that are just bankers. As it happens, we actually attract really people from every single walk of life, but there are people generally that have very, very well-defined professional backgrounds. And usually what they're doing is they're actually trying to perhaps get out of that compartmentalized area where they've been pigeonholed by the organization. So perhaps they're trying to get out of that silo towards more synthetic roles, more managerial roles, more strategic roles that allow them to look at the organization from above. So rather than trying to look at very, very specific areas within the organization, they want to be able to look at the interplay between different functional areas, and they want to be preparing strategy at the highest level. And to be able to do that, therefore, the MBA has to be quite general. And this really is where we differ from other types of master's qualifications. So usually, many people that may contemplate doing an MBA in the first instance are actually asking themselves whether to perhaps continue on a very specific career track they're already in, or whether they want to become more general, more synthetic, more strategic managers and leaders. And this is precisely what I said, that this broadness, this generality is a key hallmark of an MBA. So for example, an accountant or somebody that works in finance or in banking might be looking perhaps to doing an MSc in finance or in accounting, or likewise with somebody that is an interest in marketing or sales and might be looking at MSc in marketing or sales, or different aspects of engineering, or different aspects of HR or operations management. In economics, we're not trying to funnel you further into that area of expertise. We're trying to get you out of that area of expertise. And as such, we're trying to get you to understand how organizations work, perhaps a bit more holistically. And this is why in an MBA, you would typically be looking at every single functional area or every department in a traditional organization. You would be receiving a curriculum on operations management, on marketing, on HR, organizational behavior, organizational design, on accounting, on finance. And then you would then typically bring all of those areas together in the form of that more synthetic course on strategy or strategic management, depending on how specific programs may call them. And then they might be able to allow you to customize or to tailor that journey via choice of electives, a capstone project, or indeed a way of making that program perhaps a bit more your own. But I think crucial to the understanding of the MBA is certainly the idea that rather than funneling our students in further into an area of expertise, you guys are actually trying to become more synthetic, more strategic, and you need to understand how organizations work and how we manage within them. So it's not only about that knowledge that you actually acquire in those functional areas, but also how you navigate through those organizational structures. And therefore, this is where the management side of things comes in, and where we actually teach you different skills, from project management to time management to presentations, and all that obviously mixed as well with a good bit of a dose of career support. So I think that's generally what an MBA is about. And certainly in those cases, if you're looking at MBAs like ours, so if you're in this webinar, I'm pretty sure that you're actually looking as well to programs that compete against ours that are also triply accredited. And and that obviously receive a seal of approval not only from the Association of MBAs, EQUIS, and the ASCSB, which obviously will ultimately dictate what curriculum you have to a certain extent. So every single program that would be on a par like ours would possibly have many of these components at a general level.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, there, Xavier. I just want to follow up with a question there before I go to Nia. Given that we're just coming out of COVID, the geopolitical situation, inflation, spiraling cost of living, there's a lot of things going on in the world at the moment, and I think it would be only natural for people to think and to question the value of an MBA in such uncertain times. And I think it's a reasonable question. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, please, Xavier.
Yeah, not only is it a reasonable question, Chris, I think that's a very good question, and certainly one which I'm asked from time to time by applicants that wonder what is that value of an MBA in uncertain times, really. But the answer is precisely on that broadness, on that generality that the MBA qualification will provide its holders with. And it's no coincidence, actually, that whilst there are some qualifications that are very prone to business cycles of demand and popularity. So we saw just before the dot-com bust back in the early 2000s that everybody wanted to study computing, and then back before the financial recession, everybody wanted to study banking or to study construction, only for those qualifications possibly to go out of fashion or popularity just after they were impacted with recessions on those areas. The MBA tends to be incredibly resilient precisely because of that generality that it provides you. And that generality, in essence, is providing you, or is giving you that versatility to navigate uncertainty, to really navigate a very dynamic environment. So, and again, this is not only us, but it's data that would be offered by GMAC that suggests that MBAs tend to do actually quite well during those periods of uncertainty, as people try to equip themselves with a qualification really that provides them with that contingency. If they lose their jobs or if they decide to move on, they're quite likely to be able to use the MBA qualification as a passport, really, to showing that they can understand business and management from a quite high level perspective. People come to do the MBA for many, many different reasons. They come because they want to get better jobs, or because they want to change industry, because they want to start up their own businesses, and for the exact same reasons that they might want to do an MBA in the good times, they also want to get an MBA in the bad times, because it gives them that versatility. And I think it's actually quite important to note that MBAs tend to perhaps focus within all that generality and that broadness that we spoke about, and perhaps beyond that curriculum that will be dictated on us to a certain extent by the accreditation bodies. They will tend to always try to build very, very important skills that build that credibility. We certainly do it here, and we tend to ensure that our students are actually, in essence, gaining collaboration skills. We actually tend to put them to do a lot of group work or communication skills. And here I'm not only speaking about their ability to present in public, or to be able to write an essay, or to write a business report or a good business plan, but perhaps even something like being able to pitch a business idea, being able to negotiate, or simply being able to put together an elevator pitch, or being able to basically do a bit of chit chat at a networking event. All those type of communication skills being incredibly, incredibly important for anybody that wants to navigate uncertainty. Also, we tend to make sure that we build creativity, get you to think out of the box. So do those things that computers will never do, whether that's setting up a new business, preparing a new strategy, critical thinking, and then certainly as well, and most importantly, get you to have some confidence, and not only confidence in yourself, but confidence in the future, confidence on the opportunities that can come about, uncertainty, and a very, very dynamic environment, really.
Excellent, thanks. And now, Nia, I think thinking about the audience that we have today, this, we're also recording this, so we'll have many people continuing to watch it over the coming days and weeks. And again, I think many people will be wondering, is an MBA right for me? Should I be doing an MBA? Should I invest the time and money in an MBA? So I'm just wondering, and this is not specifically about our MBA program. This is, again, just general in terms of the type of individuals who consider undertaking an MBA. So the question to you is, Nia, what type of individual does consider taking an MBA?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. So, I mean, in general, it's individuals who are coming with strong, consistent career progression and achievement. So ambitious people, really, people who want to win at life, people who really want to get on in their personal and their professional lives. That's the type of individuals that we see on the MBA in Manchester, and that you'll see in other schools as well. As Xavier mentioned, it's people who have perhaps been in a specific function and are looking to funnel out the knowledge of business and management and have an understanding of the whole of the organization. But really, if you think about people's motivations, not just the type of individuals that want to come, because there's no specific person that comes onto the MBA. It's just people who really want to get on in life and win at life and do well in their careers. But if you think about the motivations, I mean, a good one is perhaps put in the chat box, why you're pursuing an MBA. And the main reasons that we see on the Manchester MBA, but also you'll see on other MBAs as well. I've talked about career advancement, so either in people's own companies or in their industry. Perhaps people want to pivot, change direction. Either that's in terms of their job function or even industry, where they'll need to network with people from other industries or understand how different functions work, for example. People who want to explore entrepreneurship or setting up their own company. An MBA is a good way to get knowledge of how business operates, how they operate with each other. Some people are not afraid to say that they're just looking for a bigger salary, and an MBA can sometimes help them achieve that. Others are doing it for other reasons, really, building on their international network, perhaps returning to education, looking for a level 7 qualification, where that's a master's level qualification, where you'd have to be a bit more critical in your thinking, for example. General improvement of business management skills or other skills that you'd achieve in an MBA. But also, what we hear sometimes is understanding. So when they're when they're in meetings or working with senior people in their organization, understanding the language. So an MBA helps people to understand better business and management language. So an MBA gives them that. And finally, some people just chasing the MBA badge to put on their CV, recognition, for example. There's a number of different reasons why people do an MBA, but I'd say probably wanting to win in their career advancement is probably the biggest reason why people undertake an MBA. And the type of individuals we attract, the ambitious people.
Excellent, thank you, Nia. So what Xavier and Nia have tried to do there in the opening 10 minutes or so is to just give you a broader, perhaps, understanding of MBAs, the types of things that you would study on all MBA programs, irrespective of whether you did one in the UK or in the US or in Asia. Now I am going to maybe turn a little bit more towards what we specifically do on the Manchester MBA, and I'll answer a couple of the questions that I've seen in the chat box here as well. When it comes to the Manchester Global MBA, this program started in 1992, and it's become one of the largest professional MBA programs in the world, where we recruit about 300 students every semester, so between 600 to 700 students every year. And then in a classroom, so someone has asked in terms of what a typical class size looks like. So you'd have no more than 30 people in a classroom, but of course we've got a lot more than 30 students, and you'd have a lot more than 30 students in your intake, whether you're studying in Manchester, in Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, or Shanghai. But Xavier, to move the question specifically for you then, what is it do you think that we do on the Manchester MBA, or what is it that we do on the Manchester MBA that might be different to other schools? Because you've already explained what an MBA qualification gives you in general, but what would be different in terms of what we do on our MBA, please?
I think one of our key distinguishing factors would be the way we tend to teach our students, or the way we actually get our students to engage with knowledge and with skills. And this is something not only that we do with our Global MBA or our GEMBA or our Kelly Manchester MBA, we do it with the full-time MBA. And I think it's perhaps a principle that applies to different areas of our school. It's really in our DNA. It's what we call the Manchester method, or the very, very unique or idiosyncratic, perhaps even, way of engaging with the content and with the curriculum that we get our students to learn from. And the Manchester MBA ultimately is based on the fact that we tend to get you as a student to perhaps get your hands dirty really with problems. So it's not so much about learning by rote or trying to memorize things and then getting to examine you at the very end to regurgitate that knowledge whatsoever, but it's getting you from the get-go really to look at incredibly unstructured and dynamic situations, what we normally refer to as wicked problems. So typically, for instance, in a workshop, what we would do is we would be expecting our students to spend a couple of days discussing, debating, engaging with knowledge, trying to contextualize it, what's good about specific point of view, what's bad about it, how it applies to specific environments, or how it might not apply to specific industries. And then ultimately, we always end up assessing our students in the workshop by means of some form of a practical exercise. It might well be, for example, that you're doing a class of negotiations, in which case you would possibly be engaged, well, possibly not, you would be engaging into a simulated exercise. But in the vast majority of workshops, we always end up asking our students to present as part of a group, really. And that presentation will typically involve getting to grips again with a very, very unstructured and a very current situation. I do a bit of teaching on economics of strategy. It's a course that we actually call strategy and competition. And as it happens, I just finished one of the workshops on Saturday, and I was actually asking students to present some cases to me. And in essence, what we do in this course is, for example, we try to place the concept of interdependence at the very heart of the inquiry, to try to look at how actions trigger reactions, how what I know about my competitors might influence my own strategy. And rather than speak about that in terms of what we tend to call a set of theories, which we call game theory, but rather than looking at it from a rather theoretical or mathematical perspective, we look at it at a very high level, an intuitive level. And I tend to ask my students, look, there you have a company. So typical companies, or the ones that I gave my students this time around, were Netflix, were Apple. I also gave them Airbus, and I gave them Zara, I think it was. And that's all the information I gave them. I just gave them a company, and I asked them to try to present the case of this company in relation to another near rival in some game of interdependence, to try to look at how these companies were influencing each other, and then how the analysis that they perform, based on a number of techniques and a number of views of interdependence that we would have been covering during the workshop, how those actually then inform our perhaps speculative exercise as to how we see that competition going into the future, and certainly how it can actually inform the type of recommendations that we actually give to those organizations. So as you can see, it's a very unstructured, a very dynamic situation that our MBAs will need to put structure into. One also that relies into group work, and then one which ultimately is incredibly reflective. And whether that is by means of a presentation in a class on economics of strategy, or in a class, for example, where you look at the interdependencies between operations and marketing, where what they actually do is, for instance, having to come up with a new product over a period of 4 days, and not only looking at how they will market it, but also how they will actually operationalize it. Whatever that exercise is, it always, absolutely always relates to an unstructured and dynamic situation as part of group work, and one which is incredibly reflective. This is very much so part and parcel really of what our professional MBAs are, and indeed as well our full-time MBAs is really embedded into how we do things. And Chris was actually, for instance, speaking about how we tend to put you in workshops. I think it's quite interesting to note we never put you in workshops of more than 30 people, and usually it's actually less than that, simply because for us to be able to have such a dynamic, such a perhaps critical type of debate and discussion in a class, we need to do it within very small groups that will allow us to basically draw on knowledge from absolutely everybody and make sure that everybody is actually being part of the class and the discussion.
Okay, thanks, Xavier. I think there's a question from Matt in the audience as well, which I think is quite timely, which I'm going to pass over to Nia. And Matt is asking how our part-time or professional MBA students are supported on the global MBA, in addition to the workshops that we deliver. And I think that's a good question, because support is something that people would inevitably be thinking about because they've been outside of education for a while. So any insights that you'd like to offer Matt and the rest of the audience there, please, Nia?
Yeah, thanks for a really great question, Matt, actually, and this will benefit everyone. So in terms of the teaching, so we operate, it's called a blended learning approach. So on the part-time MBA, you would come onto campus in Manchester for a block of around 6 face-to-face days of teaching by the academic, depending on the course that you take. And then in between those blocks of teaching, obviously you will have full access to our e-learning platform, Blackboard. The lectures also do online lectures, so virtual online lectures, as well as host virtual office hours where you can drop in, usually on a weekly basis, to ask questions relating to the course or the assignment. And we also have discussion boards on Blackboard as well, where you can ask questions. So that's the support that we offer at the teaching level, but also alongside that for student support. Obviously we have a fully staffed, quite a large student support team with supporting our students throughout the program. Obviously we have technical staff, IT staff. We are part of the University of Manchester. You would have access to the university's library, the counselling service. We also have a specific postgraduate career service, which is based at the business school as well. So you will have access to the business school career service, both during your program and once you graduate. The other way that we support students is we have an MBA preparation course. So, if it's been a couple of years since you've been at university, or maybe if you haven't been to university at all, then we do have an MBA preparation course where we cover study skills, just getting you up to speed with the study skills required for the MBA, but also we do introduce you to some of the core course units on our MBA as well. So we definitely, really support students before you start and during the program and afterwards as well, with our alumni relation activities.
Thanks, Nia. Xavier, I'm going to go back to you because I did have a follow-up question for you, and you've already earlier on, when you were talking about MBAs in general, you used the term critical thinking, and another term I hear used often, very similar, I guess, is critical skills. So I'm just wondering, these terms are coming up more and more and more now. How do you think we deliver that on the Manchester MBA, the critical thinking and the critical skills?
Yeah, so obviously, being critical is perhaps in stark contrast to being a very deterministic individual, where you see the world in dichotomous terms or in black and white terms, and instead is just, in essence, understanding or recognizing the fact that there are many shades of gray, and that perhaps the answers that you need to give to every single situation are different and are very highly dependent on the situation or what affects it. I think in essence, we try to get our MBAs to engage with critical thinking at many different levels. So at program level, through the type of modules that we actually design and embed into our program. So our starting course, and that is whether you're taking the Global MBA, the Global Executive MBA, or the Kelly Manchester MBA, is a course which we call Leading and Managing the Global Environment, that is focused on the understanding of the trends that underpin the business environment in which managers today need to navigate. And here, for instance, rather than asking you for very specific answers that will be based on a yes or no, we tend to focus on issues such as, for example, the transition to net zero economy, or indeed the transition from what would have been traditionally shareholder-based economy with a prevalence on shareholder value or profit, which is possibly something that made MBAs quite infamous maybe 20 years ago, when we were just sending them to become corporate bankers and consultants and so on. But moving from that shareholder value form of capitalism to perhaps a more inclusive form of stakeholder capitalism, where we're actually looking at companies and managers having to look at the interests of many different parties. Certainly the shareholder, without a doubt, but also the communities where we operate, and certainly our employees, or indeed as well looking at the environment. So here, for example, we take a lot of focus on CSR or ESG type issues. And again, those issues actually can be looked at from many different perspectives, many different prisms. Everybody has an opinion on them, and no opinion is good, no opinion is bad. Every single opinion is relative to the context in which is actually being made. Ultimately, I think that perhaps is the way that we ask you to argue things based on data, on evidence, or simply on reason, that would allow you to perhaps develop your critical skills and being able to look at the world from different perspectives, never thinking that there's always a correct answer, but perhaps looking at different perspectives, trying to contrast different theories, trying to contrast different points of view, different models, different frameworks. And we even take that to the extreme in our program, because one, we tend to get you to work always in groups, as I said a bit earlier, in other words, to try to generate more ideas that will indeed get you to have those different points of view, but also because our assessment is one that is also conducive to learning. So we don't use exams, for example, because it is not our objective to prove that you've actually learned some intended learning outcomes, but we use actually the process of assessment as a conduit to your learning. May that be those presentations, or may those be critical essays, and those assessments in their own right, because they are not conducive to you actually calculating Nash equilibrium, or telling us what of the, or which of the five forces analysis applies to one organization, or whether you believe in yes or no terms that the world is financialized. Quite the opposite, one where we actually open to your opinion, so long as it's actually properly supported by evidence, by data, or by reason, is ultimately getting to build your critical skills from many different perspectives.
Thank you, Xavier. Now over to you now, Nia, please. You know, you gave the audience an insight earlier on the type of person who would consider an MBA in general. But following on from, you know, Xavier's there talking a bit more in depth about our program, and I'd like for you to carry on in that mold, please, and give the audience an idea of the type of individuals that will be in their classroom on the Manchester MBA.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll talk about some averages so you can have an idea, but I'll also talk about the diversity on the program as well. So in terms of averages for our global part-time professional MBA, the average age is around 35, and people coming with about 10 years of professional experience. But we are seeing a lot more students in their 20s come on our professional MBA these days. So perhaps people who feel like they want to carry on working, but also they're ready for an MBA and they want to pick up that qualification at the same time. So that's quite different to before, where usually people in their 20s would go on the full time. So we are accepting a wide range of age ranges, but the average is around 35. On our Global Executive MBA, people are a bit older with obviously more substantial managerial and leadership experience. So on our Global Executive MBA, the average age is about 40 to 41, but we've had somebody in their late 50s on there. So, you know, it really does vary, and some people in their 30s as well, depending on their experience. In terms of the companies that they come from, so, you know, really diverse actually. So we're having people come on to the Global MBA from big multinational corporations, people that you'll be aware of: Shell, KPMG, BAE Systems, JP Morgan Chase, Jaguar Land Rover, Red Bull, for example, but also a huge amount of students coming from SMEs. From across the world, and these people are coming from a variety of different roles. As Xavier said, the MBA landscape has changed a lot, so it's not traditional anymore. So people are coming from you know, their roles in finance and accounting, lots of engineers, IT specialists, people in sales and marketing, but also people coming from non-traditional backgrounds. So I'm you know, a number of doctors and people in clinical positions are on our MBA, but also lawyers. We've got one of the top female lawyers in the country on our Global Executive MBA. So we're having a range of different people joining us, which is fantastic. In terms of where people are coming from, so for our Manchester MBA, for our Manchester Centre MBA, around 50% of the cohort are from the UK, and the majority of those are from the Northwest, although we are having students from London and from other areas of the UK, and then about 49% from the rest of the world. So for the Manchester Centre, we're having students coming from North and South America, from Africa, and also from Europe as well. So it's really diverse, and it's great to see so many different types of people from different backgrounds on our Global MBA in Manchester.
Excellent, thanks. I think that's a very good snapshot there for the audience. Now, Xavier, I'm gonna come back to you, and I suppose, you know, we had a few questions so far, some just general, some specifically on the Manchester MBA, and I guess this one, it almost fits in between general and Manchester, but I do think you could potentially help the audience quite a lot with this one, and I've seen a couple of questions that are quite similar to this. So I want to focus on the face-to-face elements. You've touched on it with regards to workshops, etc. And I want to focus on face-to-face elements on professional MBAs. There's so many options. We've got our, your traditional executive MBAs, 60 to 80 days face-to-face on some programs. We've got some MBAs 100% online. On our Global MBA, Nia began splitting it out earlier. We've got 29 days of face-to-face contact on our Global MBA. So what advice have you got, Xavier, or how do you think prospective students should consider the study format whilst picking the right MBA for them?
Yeah, I think, Chris, actually, that's a very, very individual answer, and ultimately depends on every individual's motivations and circumstances. It's very, very difficult to give a universal set of recommendations here, not least because there are some people that learn in different ways, or some people that come to expect different things out of an MBA. But you're absolutely right that nowadays professional MBAs are part of a very wide spectrum that may go from MBAs that are purely delivered online to MBAs that in essence are purely delivered face-to-face. And in between, you have pretty much everything. And it's perhaps not only about the quantity of face-to-face as opposed to the quantity of online MBA, but how that online MBA elements, or those face-to-face or in-person elements, are actually packaged. In other words, it might well be that you're actually looking at MBAs that are offering a certain form of a blend that asks you to perhaps attend classes every second weekend, or every couple of weeks for a few evenings, every 15 days, or every 21 days. And of course, there might be people that might be looking for that constant face-to-face so as not to lose momentum. Other people might prefer more flexibility. And this is, for example, what we tend to cater for. So in our case, speaking about 29 days, for instance, in our Global MBA, slightly more for our Global Executive MBA. I think we're around 32, 33 days, with a bit of variances in that some of our electives allow you to do more than 3-day workshops and so on. But it's the idea that we, as Nia was mentioning earlier, we tend not simply to give you a 3-day workshop where we concentrate our face-to-face interactions here and there, but we tend to package them in workshop residential so as to minimize the discrete number of times that you actually have to come to Manchester, or indeed that you, if you prefer taking, for example, your electives abroad, time that you might have to go to Shanghai or Hong Kong or Singapore or Dubai, wherever you might be going. So it's obviously about thinking about the flexibility that you actually require here, in addition to whether you are somebody that learns better by virtue of being in a class face-to-face, or perhaps that you learn better online in your own home or in your own library. So there's a lot of aspects here to be considered. I think the number of days is incredibly important, and certainly whether people actually want to have more face-to-face or more online, but also how that face-to-face, wherever it exists, whether that face-to-face is actually packaged in blocks that basically give you the flexibility with rather large chunks of time in between, or whether they tend to rely on you coming every weekend, as I said, or a few evenings every week. And I think that perhaps also tends to determine the type of audience that you might end up having in a professional MBA class ultimately. So those professional MBAs that tend to make you go to class every weekend, or every second weekend, or every Thursday and every Wednesday, will possibly rely on a rather small geographical spread. People might not be able to travel from abroad, for example, for constant learning interventions, and so they will tend to attract a very local population, and perhaps from a smaller pool of individuals that might it might well be if it's a very, very big location to be incredibly senior, but usually you would not see as much seniority. Whereas by concentrating them as we do in the Manchester MBA, I don't think we normally only produce flexibility, but we also are able to bring in a lot more quality because we're actually basically opening up the pool of applicants that we have from all over the world.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Xavier. I mean, one thing Xavier didn't touch on there, which I also think will be important to the audience, is cost. One of the, if you've got an MBA program with 60, 70, 80 days of face-to-face contact, then that will come at a higher price. If we changed our MBA now to have 60 days, could we do it? Yes, we could, but it would also have a significant impact on the cost. So I've got a couple of questions also still remaining for Nia and Xavier, but to the audience, if you've got any general questions, feel free to type them in the chat box. Rupert and myself will stay online after this session ends in the next 10 minutes to answer any general admissions questions, etc. If you've got any just general MBA type questions, by all means type them in. Nia, Xavier touched on there about taking classes in, I think he said Dubai or Singapore. What do you think about the value of an MBA with a global focus for both candidates who have a global role, but also for those candidates who may not have a global role? We see both on our MBA. I'm just interested if you can give any insights to the audience about the value that we bring there on our global MBA.
Yeah, so obviously Xavier talked about working in diverse teams, and it does come with challenges sometimes. So effectively, even if you don't have a global role, the opportunity to work in diverse teams will help you really develop some good skills in terms of communicating with people from different backgrounds and different cultures, for example, learning to negotiate, working as a team. So really, it just gives you good all-round skills in the workplace, even if your role is not global. But you never know what's going to happen in the future either. Perhaps your role is not global at the moment, but one day it might be. So there's definitely benefits to being on a global MBA and meeting with people from different backgrounds. As I mentioned, in the future you might have another role. You've then got an international network you can tap into in the future in terms of our alumni network. So there's lots of benefits, really.
Yeah, thanks, Nia. And Xavier, you going back to your to the previous question I asked you when you were going through the different program types, etc. On our global MBA, or actually no, on the Manchester MBA, and I believe it's something that you believe in, we as a school believe in, everyone will graduate with the exact same qualification, whether they've done our global MBA, whether they've done our finance accelerated MBA, whether they've done our Kelly Manchester MBA, whether they've done our full-time MBA, whether they've done our global executive MBA. Do you think, I mean, maybe two parts of the question, why do we do that? And do you think there's value there for students?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, we are very wedded to what we believe an MBA graduate should be able to complete an MBA with, and that is, in essence, valid and relevant to our graduates in our full-time MBA or any of our professional MBAs. And as such, we think that all our intended learning outcomes have to be common, and this is why not only we have all our MBAs graduate with the exact same MBA, a Manchester MBA, but why we actually really align the intended learning outcomes and the curricula that we actually cover, again, between our full-time MBA, our global MBA, our global executive MBA, or our Kelly Manchester MBA. Now, of course, our audiences are slightly different. They come at different points in their careers. and certainly as well, they come with slightly different expectations. And obviously, the way we teach a full-time MBA who is here on campus 24/7 is very different to the way we can actually teach and how we can actually relate with our global part-time or professional MBAs. But nonetheless, we're still wedded, as I said, to that idea that you should be graduating with an MBA with a specific set of knowledge, skills, and values, really. And that is why our curricula are so aligned. So our core units, for example, are common to our MBAs. We teach them differently, but the academics are actually the same, even if we use different modes of teaching them. And even our electives, we have around 25 electives in our program, and they're actually common to all our portfolio of MBAs, again because we make sure that all our MBAs have access to the same relevant knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. So I think final question from me is going to come to you, Nia. And then we'll see if we've got any more questions from the audience. What do our graduates tell you of some of the benefits from having studied the Manchester MBA?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chris. I mean, one interesting thing when I speak to our students and ask them, what made them decide to come onto the Manchester MBA, for example, many of them will tell me that they're in a meeting at work and they see somebody operate in the meeting and they've got this confidence about them. They're able to make decisions a bit better. They're offering really great solutions. And that's one of the reasons why they came onto our MBA, because they want to be like that person. So that tells you something. But in terms of what kind of skills, our MBA graduates have, they develop on the program, and they have after they left the program as well. Decision making is a big one. So obviously, in terms of our teaching, Xavier mentioned the Manchester method. It's a very practical way of teaching where we're giving you opportunities to make decisions. So obviously, when you're practicing that in a safe environment, and maybe you're making mistakes in the classrooms, and you're talking about them with a teacher, your decision making is becoming a lot better. So not just decision makings on a specific problem, but also decision making that where you consider the wide implications outside of your organization. So really good decision making skills, creativity again, which also links to decision making. So people tell us that they're able to come up with better ideas and solutions as a result of our MBA, which not just changes the organization, but also in their personal lives as well. Definitely helping teams and even their organizations become more efficient and work more effectively. Teams work more effectively with each other. And obviously we've talked before about the ability to work in really diverse environments. So these are some of the top skills, and we know this because we survey students, and one of the biggest things they tell us from the MBA is the confidence that they gain. I think when something is quite challenging and you're put into a situation where you're working with different teams, it's really high pressured, you do gain a lot of confidence. That obviously we support you through the process, but you do gain a lot of self-confidence. People tell us that they're more comfortable working in highly competitive environments after their MBA. They're better at resolving their problems, they're better at time management, they're better at dealing with people professionally, and ultimately they're able to go after what they want and accelerate their career faster. So lots of positive skills and attributes that they gain during the MBA, and they can apply immediately as well to their workplace.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that answer, Nia. And actually, I've got a question here from Nick, and it's perhaps it's almost the opposite of the question I asked you, Nia, in terms of the benefits from graduating on the Manchester MBA. And what Nick is asking, and it is a very good question, is what are the most common challenges that Xavier and Nia that you see from our MBA students? What are the most challenging aspects of the Manchester MBA?
Right, I'll start, and then maybe Nia wants to add to them. I think some of the key challenges that our students may actually see have to do with the fact that sometimes we put them on at the deep end when it comes to group dynamics. So you might be used to working with with others as part of a group, but ultimately might be within your organization where there's a hierarchy that dictates the fact that you guys all need to work towards a specific common goal, but you're part of an organizational culture that dictates the way you guys think about something or specific KPIs that you guys are working towards. Whereas here you're actually working with individuals that come from literally every single walk of life, look at the world from very, very, very different perspectives, come from different nationalities, different cultures, and we give you a task to complete sometimes within 2 days during a workshop. So basically you get 2 evenings to work on them. And yeah, that can actually be very, very difficult because difficult as it may be to agree on a scope, it's very difficult then to, for example, put forward some strategic recommendations and make them look as though the whole team are actually agreeing with, when in reality everybody might be looking at it from different perspectives. So I think group dynamics is one. It is actually difficult, but at the same time, I think it's incredibly rewarding. Nia, any other you can think of yourself?
Somebody's mentioned time management there, and actually there's a couple of questions about time management, and you're right, that is one of the challenges as well. There's a couple of things that we do to help that. I do a webinar on time management. I've really got into time management tips recently, so you can perhaps listen into my webinar and take those tips on board. I mean, the curriculum is designed for people who are working, so it is achievable to do this MBA whilst you're working full time, and many of you will have families too. It's achievable, but it's just about prioritizing and making sure that you've got all the deadlines in advance and making sure that you become quite disciplined really in terms of your reading and in terms of giving yourself enough time to prepare for assignments. And obviously when we've got the workshops on, you have to clear your diary that week. So, 6 days, you have to be honest with work and your family, that is your MBA time when you'll be on campus. So it is doable. It's just about getting the right tips and tools in place and giving yourself the space to, enjoy your MBA, even though it will be quite challenging.
Thank you. Thank you, Nia, and thank you, Xavier, for both of your time today. I think you've contributed excellently to this webinar, and I genuinely think many in the audience will be able to take some key takeaways from this that will help them with their MBA research over the coming weeks and months as they potentially embark on an MBA in 2023. So that will draw to a conclusion the panel now, but for the rest of the audience, myself and Rupert will continue to be online to answer any other questions that you have. I have seen a couple of additional questions which both of us will be able to help with. So Xavier, Nia, thank you once again for all your help.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Hope to see you soon. Bye.